Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Senator Carol Blood, spelled C-A-R-O-L, B as in boy, L-O-O-D as in dog, and I represent District 3, which is composed of Western Bellevue and Southeastern Papillion, Nebraska. Thank you for yet another opportunity today to share LB14 with all of you and to those listening in on today's hearing. So when it comes to licensure, navigating the various state licensing requirements, the regulations, rules, and fee structure can be very challenging, especially to our military spouses who move approximately every 2 years from base to base. Unlike universal reciprocity that only allows for someone to enter our state and get to work, interstate compacts allow for these same military spouses to move from state to state and practice across state lines unencumbered. These compacts create reciprocal professional licensing practices between states and ensure the quality and safety of services and safeguards each state's sovereignty. There are over 40 states and territories who adopted at least one of the 9 available occupational licensure compacts, and there are more to come because of their high level of success. It is something each individual industry has enthusiastically supported and helped to create. I've included an updated map that shows where Nebraska and other states stand in this process. It's in your handouts. I'd also like to point out that this is not an interstate compact versus universal reciprocity issue. States have both because they serve different purposes, and I'll walk you through some of that when I present tomorrow's LB15. All regulatory interstate compacts are certainly not alike. However, the professions of medicine, nursing, psychology, and physical therapy are great examples of effective compacts that Nebraska has chosen to support. Medicine constructed its compacts to address expedited licensure, while nursing, psychology, and physical therapy's compacts create a multi-state license. Nebraska reaps the benefits as a member of these and other interstate compacts. Now I'm hoping to have another compact move forward here in Nebraska for audiologists and speech-language pathologists. In Nebraska, we have nearly 200 licensed audiologists, which equates to about 9 audiologists for every 100,000 people. We have 1,285 licensed speech-language pathologists, which is about 67 for every 100,000 Nebraskans. An audiologist is someone who diagnoses and treats a patient's hearing and balance problems using advanced technology and procedures. The majority of audiologists work in healthcare facilities such as hospitals, physicians' offices, and audiology clinics, and some work in schools. Speech-language pathologists, you may know them as speech therapists, assess, diagnose, treat, and help to prevent communication and swallowing disorders in children and adults. Speech, language, and swallowing disorders result from a variety of causes such as stroke, brain injury, hearing loss, developmental delay, Parkinson's disease, cleft palate, or autism. As you read in the bill, the purpose of the Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology Compact is to increase public access to audiology and speech-language pathology services by providing for the mutual recognition of other members' state licenses to enhance the state's ability to protect the public's health and safety, encourage cooperation of member states in regulating multi-state audiology and speech-language pathology practice, support spouses of relocating active duty military personnel, enhance the exchange of licensure, investigative and disciplinary information between member states, allow a remote state to hold a provider of services with a compact privilege in that state accountable to that state's practice standards, and allow for the use of telehealth technology to facilitate increased access to audiology and speech-language pathology services. Long list. Each state participating in the compact will not cede any regulatory autonomy. Nebraska will continue to regulate the actual practice of audiology and speech-language pathology and maintain their individual scopes of practice. Upon review of the state participation section, you should note that the requirements that must be met by states to join the compact are very clear and state that the professional must hold a home state license in a compact state, participate in an FBI fingerprint-based criminal background check, and meet the licensure requirements noted in the compact. This has been a standard in all of our compacts here in Nebraska. When a participant gains a privilege to practice, they may only have one home state license at a time, for that is all they will need as a member. The privilege to practice is renewable upon the renewal of the home state license, and they must function within the laws and regulations of the remote state. If the home state license is encumbered, the licensee shall lose the compact privilege in all remote states until the home state license is no longer encumbered and 2 years have passed since the adverse action. Active duty military personnel or spouses may designate a home state where the individual has a current license in good standing. The individual may retain the home state designation during the period the service member is on active duty. Now, I want to be clear that nothing in the compact will override a compact state's decision that an audiologist or speech-language pathologist participation in an alternative program may be used in lieu of an adverse action, and that such participation shall remain non-public if required by the compact state law. The home state may take adverse actions against an audiologist or speech-language pathologist license. A remote state may take adverse action on an audiologist or speech-language pathologist privilege to practice within that remote state. Compacts create an extra layer of protection where the participating states can share a provider disciplinary actions to protect consumers and those organizations that may hire a potentially problematic employee. They do this through their shared database. Additionally, the compact clearly addresses the obligations of the home state, obligations of the member states, how adverse actions are resolved, and compact funding and governance. Also, if you are currently licensed in your state to practice, you are not mandated to expand your license beyond that and are not forced to join the compact. The compact is an optional tool for those who choose to partake in the benefits of the compact. So in a nutshell, this compact creates a mechanism that allows the legal, ethical, and regulated practice of interstate practice by granted qualified audiologists and speech-language pathologists the privilege to practice in other compact member states. It allows for telehealth to be practiced in member states. It allows for increased access to underserved communities and gives our military personnel and spouses a means to maintain their profession when relocating. I will note that this bill is also on the yearly priority list that we receive from the Department of Defense Military Community and Family Policy Office to help our state continue on the path to becoming a leader in military-friendly policy. On a broader scale, the DoD entered into a cooperative agreement with CSG to assist with the funding of the development of interstate compacts on licensed occupations in order to alleviate the burden associated with the relicensing by spouses of members of the armed forces in connection with a permanent change of duty of members to another state. This investment, and it was a large investment, by the department towards what we're trying to do with these compacts is going to continue to remove hurdles and red tapes in dozens of professions over the next few years. There's actually a story in this month's issue of CSG that highlights this relationship. I've given you a copy today for your perusal so you can learn more about it. So while this compact is not yet active, many states are rushing to put it into effect. There are currently 6 states that have enacted this particular compact. They are Wyoming, Utah, Oklahoma, Louisiana, North Carolina, and West Virginia. When 10 total states adopt it, the compact will officially go live, with Washington, Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana, Kentucky, Georgia, Maryland, and New Hampshire all considering similar bills to LB14. It's certainly a possibility that this may be enacted by the end of this year. Had we done this last year when it was first presented, we would have been the first in the compact. So in that short window of time, 6 states have already passed this compact. That's pretty remarkable. So in other words, things are moving quickly, and we should get in on that action while the getting is good. I'll also point out that because this is far from the first compact bill that I've brought, I know some of the questions that might arise. Chief among those is whether or not states that border us are interested in participating. And that's usually Senator Williams' question, and now he's not here for me to tell him. So I'll again point to Kansas, Iowa, and Colorado, who are all considering joining up, and Wyoming having already adopted it. There's two final quick points I want to make on this bill. The first is that I'm sure you'll all agree that the state is going to be in a bit of a budget crunch in this biennium, and likely a few years beyond. Let me assure you that joining this compact is not a costly endeavor. If you look at something like the Physical Therapist Compact, the fiscal note was approximated at just $2,000 every 2 years. That is absolutely a small price to pay for legislation that allows workers to hit the ground running when they move to Nebraska, or to generate additional revenue by utilizing their skills in other states in person or via telemedicine. This means more money for the state coffers and a better quality of life for those generating the dollars. Remember as well that during a natural disaster, mass emergencies, and other large events that we often need our workers in different medical fields to help and respond in other states as well. There's no downside to these compacts, and one of the many reasons that the Department of Defense has so heavily invested funds in their creation. There are more to come in the future, as I've sat in on many of those meetings. With that, I'll close by saying licensure is constitutionally a state power. So let's work together and move this voluntary, expedited pathway forward and facilitate multi-state practice here in our state, along with what will soon be a total of 10 states to implement this compact. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I do plan on staying for closing, but I do have folks here to testify, so you may want to allow them to speak, knowing that some of your questions may be answered through their testimony. I also did bring an amendment you should all have in front of you as part of the packet I handed out that would need to be adopted before LB14 can be moved to the floor. This is mostly just harmonizing language that was approved with the compact people. There's also some immunity language from the trial attorneys that they asked us to insert, and the compact people are good with that language as well. We actually did that with all the other compacts we've brought forward here in Nebraska. And finally, in your handouts, I did offer several letters of support from John Wyville of the Nebraska Commission, who is the Nebraska Commissioner for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and Kirk Peck. As we continue to iron out the process for getting these letters submitted in time for the hearing, these two came after the deadline, but I thought they were important to have included in the record. So I hope we can have that happen. And with that, I will close for now, and thank you all.
Okay. Questions? Senator Wood.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Very quickly, if Nebraska and Colorado would join the compact, does that also mean that somebody who's practicing in Colorado could provide services to someone in western Nebraska?
If indeed they were part of the compact, yes, absolutely. Okay. One of the things that I always remember from the psychology compact that we did is that psychologists told me that if they had a patient that would go on vacation, perhaps in another state, and they would have, maybe they were dealing with anxiety issues and needed to speak, they couldn't do it legally over the telephone. But with the Interstate Compact and with the telehealth part of it, they can now not only communicate with them across state lines, but anything that they do across state lines as part of the compact, if that state belongs to it, is now legal. So you can imagine how the ease that it creates for people who need to practice in multiple states. Not to mention the income generation, the extra income they can generate, right?
All right, thank you.
Other questions? I do have several questions, and I'll pose some of them and I'll hold some of them. But
okay.
You mentioned that we did hear this bill last year, or something similar, and the Department of Health and Human Services came in strong opposition. Did you have discussions with the department to resolve some of those issues?
To be very frank, and that person is no longer in that department, there seemed that the only opposition they truly had, so I don't know if strong opposition is the right word last year, is they didn't want us to be first in a compact because they felt that it was the unknown. But with all due respect, every single compact is basically the same. And he thought that there might be these outrageous charges as the first in the compact because we would not know how much it was going to cost the state of Nebraska. And that's what we were told was the biggest issue for them. But if you think about it, if you're Nebraska, Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, and you join a compact, as a person that's representing your state, are you going to say, I know that we usually have it be $2,000, but I think it should be $20,000? I mean, with all due respect, that makes no sense. Why would these states come in and want to charge more than what's been traditionally done across the United States with every single compact?
I appreciate that. I went back and retrieved the letter that he provided for testimony last year, Darrell Klein, and there were other issues, but at any rate, that was one of the questions.
With all due respect, we have met with HHS, and they had a couple of questions, but no issues. And I think, again, it was a difference between understanding what a compact really did and how it worked, and not meeting with us on those issues prior.
Okay. Another question. The other states that are implementing this, are they required to use the exact same language? So that's a requirement. This language is the language used in all the other states that are implementing this compact.
I mean, there are exceptions. For example, when they come to Nebraska, we always have the immunity language that's added. But when it comes to actual working mechanisms, and there are people behind me that can better explain this than I, but when it comes to actual mechanisms that allow the bill to function, those don't change. And they don't change because it's something that the states have all gotten together on and agreed upon.
Okay.
So there's no infighting about it.
Right. Yeah, it's just whether or not, I recall this as a question from last year, state law versus compact, which rules, and of course this would become state law. For instance, there's reference to telehealth, one of the things I'm very interested in, obviously, and it's fairly broad. Audiology can use telehealth for all services. All services are allowed with audiology. We have in other statutes, other language, we have restrictions as to what can and cannot be used, and that type of thing. So what?
You just answered your own question because if you look at the compact, you'll see, and Janet is better informed on this than I am, but whatever your rules are in your state, you still follow the rules in your state when it comes to things like that. Those don't change.
Okay, so a blanket statement on telehealth doesn't mean that, okay, all right, very good.
And good question, though.
Okay, I'll hold my other questions and I'll listen to the other testimony, but thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Kavanaugh.
Sorry, I apologize if this was already asked or answered, but we're making a change from licensing board to commission, and this is so that we can have people practice across state lines if they move here. So for let's talk about our military personnel. When we've had bills in the past too. I think we had a realtor bill last year to make it easier. How does the military feel about switching to a compact model?
So if I hear you correctly, are you talking about the difference between universal reciprocity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. Hang on, I think I have some notes. I just want to make sure I stay concise. I thought someone might ask me that. All right. So let's walk very briefly about the difference between universal reciprocity and interstate compacts. And these notes are from a meeting that I had with the Military Families Office from the Pentagon. So this does come directly from the people who have invested very deeply in these interstate compacts and why they are concerned about states having only universal reciprocity and not both universal reciprocity and interstate compacts, because they can cohabitate and serve different purposes. So both of them require that a practitioner abide by the scope of practices of the state, which we just talked about, in which they're practicing. Both of them allow for expeditious interstate movement of practitioners during emergencies, and both of them reduce barriers for out-of-state practitioners aiming to practice in our state. However, that's the only time that they're the same. So interstate compacts, unlike universal reciprocity, reduce barriers for in-state practitioners aiming to practice in multiple states. It allows military spouses, Senator Kavanaugh, to maintain a single home state license for the duration of the service member's active duty, regardless of relocations, without submitting a separate application to each state's licensure board. It allows practitioners to work in multiple states, both in person and via telehealth or telework, without submitting a separate application to each state's licensure board, requiring a verification of the current license or obtaining a new background check. It brings together a coalition of states to establish a uniform and enforceable interstate licensure standards that are narrowly tailored to the public protection requirements of a specific profession. It enhances public protection by creating a multi-state database of licensure information to facilitate collaboration on license verification and investigations of potential misconduct. And that one's really important. This shared database, if you're a ne'er-do-well and say that, for instance, that you're a pedophile and you've been busted in your home state, that's going to go into the database. Right now, that database doesn't exist. And what we're seeing with people that are ne'er-do-wells in that area is that they tend to find ways to go to other states and start practicing again. And so that shared database alone is so valuable and protects the people who are hiring these bad guys, right? Because you don't want to be sued to find out later that this person does the same thing in your state. And then it allows multi-state practice without requiring the practitioner to change state of residence, with a few exceptions on that one. So Iowa and Arizona's universal recognition law requires that the practitioner resides in the state, while other states like Colorado and Idaho do not. So that one's kind of a sometimes yes and sometimes no. But the previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I stated are all only within the Interstate Compact. So for instance, if I live in Nebraska and I'm an audiologist and I get my license and I have no desire to practice across state lines, I don't have to join the compact. But if I live, say, in Bellevue and I want to be able to practice in both Council Bluffs and Bellevue and Omaha, I have the ability, once Iowa joins that compact, to not have to get a second license. So it's really a very wonderful thing. What it does basically is it not only embraces what the governor has said in his State of the State address that he wants to do for military families, but kind of puts it on steroids.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, and we'll let you close a little bit.
Thank you.
Are there proponents for LB14 that would like to speak?
There. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to the HHS
Good
meeting.
afternoon, Chairman Arch and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. I'm Janet Saloff, JANET SEELHOFF. I serve as Executive Director for the Nebraska Speech Language Hearing Association. I am testifying on behalf of our audiologists and speech language pathologists across the state that are members of our association. And we want to thank Senator Blood for all of her leadership and great work on this important legislation. I have also handed out to you, in addition to a copy of my testimony, a letter from Senator Molly Baumgardner with the Kansas legislature. As Senator Blood mentioned, Kansas is also in the process of working to get their audiology, speech language pathology compact passed, and she wanted to share a letter of support with you as well, and in turn, we are doing the same for the Kansas legislature. I want to make sure to note that the practice of audiology and speech language pathology occurs in the state where the patient, client, or student is located at the time of service. And this does include telepractice. That's the terminology we use for telehealth for our members. It's also important to emphasize that anyone wishing to practice in Nebraska is accountable to the practice standards in our state, as Senator Blood has highlighted. And the same would be true for anyone wanting to practice in other states that join the compact. Our state association has worked very closely with the American Speech Language Hearing Association, known as ASHA, to help ensure that this legislation meets the requirements of an interstate compact. We support this legislation as a measure to make sure it's easier for audiologists and speech language pathologists to be able to practice in Nebraska. And honestly, top priority is always making sure that there's access to speech language hearing services for Nebraskans, and particularly in the rural areas of our state where we often see the shortages and the challenges. And telehealth is an integral and important part of this compact to help make that happen. I've listed in my testimony the types of services our members provide. I won't read those for you. I know many of you are already familiar with that. As I mentioned in my testimony, we do have a shortage of audiologists and speech language pathologists in our state. And so this compact really does help address that. And it allows an employer to hire a candidate if they're available and they have met the competency requirements. It also helps expedite that hiring process. And speech language pathologists do still have to receive certification and must complete their continuing education requirements every 2 years in our state to maintain certification. We also have a requirement in our state that some states don't have, that if you're a speech language pathologist working in the schools, you have to maintain a teaching certificate in Nebraska. So if someone did want to come in as part of our compact and they want to teach in the schools or work in the schools, they do have to have that teaching certificate. I primarily just want to answer questions that we've been asked. Senator Blood has already addressed some of them, so I won't repeat some of those that I've got in my written testimony for you. The first question we've gotten quite a lot is, how will our state ensure that audiologists and speech language pathologists comply with Nebraska's licensure requirements? And the answer is that anybody that resides in Nebraska must continue to comply with our state's licensure requirements. They must complete the continuing education requirements every 2 years to maintain their certification, and as I mentioned, a teaching certificate. How will the compact communicate across state lines with telehealth services? And the answer is that the compact itself only requires that telehealth be allowed. The practitioner needs to be aware of the laws, regulations in the state where they provide services, and the Compact Commission will compile links to the board's laws, regulations, and post them on the website so that states can easily find that information. Another question we've been asked is, how will our state be able to verify that an audiologist or speech language pathologist coming into our state is eligible to practice under the compact? And the answer is that every applicant seeking privilege to practice does need to present proof of authorization from a member state. Senator Blood, or Senator Archer, I know you asked if we did try to meet with DHHS. Our association did reach out to them on numerous occasions, did not receive any response, but we did try to also address past concerns that they had. And Senator Blood also addressed the cost of the compact, so I won't reiterate that for you, but I'll just stop with that and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB14?
Senator Arch and fellow members of the Health and Human Services Committee, good afternoon. My name is Toni Morehouse, T-O-N-I-M-O-R-E-H-O-U-S-E. I've been a speech language pathologist for 47 years. I own Communication Works, a private speech and language clinic here in Lincoln. Over the decades, demand for services has increased, and my profession has grown to meet those needs. One significant adaptation is the use of technology. Nebraska has a scarcity of speech therapists and audiologists, especially in rural areas. The licensure compact would increase access to services across our state via telehealth. I would like to share a few examples of how several therapists at Communication Works have successfully used technology to deliver virtual services. Lindsay Wilson, an early intervention specialist, was serving a preschool client who has autism. When the family moved, Interstate collaboration allowed Lindsay to provide this child with 2 months of therapy, bridging the gap while the child waited for in-person services in her new community. Lindsay had another young client whose family temporarily moved out of state. Due to COVID, the family was not comfortable finding a new therapist. They requested, and their child began receiving online therapy with Lindsay. Without the advantage of Interstate telehealth, this child would not have been served in any capacity. Paige Lysing began seeing a young professional whose initial job required public speaking. He has congenital malformations of the tongue, which affect his swallowing and articulation, resulting in low self-esteem. The client began making progress in therapy, increasing his self-assurance during public speaking. When his job required a move out of state, the young man had concerns about starting over with a new clinician. A licensure compact would allow this client to continue treatment with Paige. Kylie Lorene has an adult client with a severe stutter who lives and works in a small town outside of Lincoln. During the pandemic, he has participated in online church events, family Zoom calls, and virtual meetings with a local stuttering group. Telehealth has provided practical application of his therapy goals, been a platform to prepare for online events, facilitated his progress, and increased this client's confidence in his communication skills. In today's world, and with technology at our fingertips, state boundaries should not define or confine access to speech, language, or hearing services. A licensure compact will increase Nebraskans' ability to connect with professionals across state lines through telehealth. Thank you for your time today and your thoughtful consideration of LB14. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Other questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much.